I found the email account by accident on a Wednesday night that had already felt too long. It was late, the kind of late when the house settles into itself and every small sound feels amplified. The refrigerator humming, the dryer clicking through its last few turns, the old floor vent whispering out warm air. I was sitting at Flynn's desk because my laptop had died in the middle of paying bills, and his was already open. He never hid his passwords from me. We had been married 8 years, together for 11, and our lives were knitted together in all the boring, intimate ways that make a marriage real. Shared streaming accounts, grocery lists scribbled on junk mail, text messages about detergent and dog food, and whether we had enough coffee for the morning. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the scanned copy of our insurance form he said he'd emailed to himself. That was all. I opened the mail tab and noticed there were 2 accounts signed in, one familiar and one I didn't recognize. The second address was strange, almost generic, a name with a few numbers after it. My first thought was that it must be some old spam account. My second thought came with a tiny, cold twist under my ribs. I clicked it. The inbox was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. No sent messages either. That should have comforted me, but it didn't. It made the account feel scrubbed clean, like a room after someone has rushed to hide evidence. My pulse started to tap harder at the base of my throat. I told myself to close it. I told myself I was inventing drama out of nothing. Then I saw the drafts folder. There were dozens of them. Some had no subject line. Some had dates attached, going back years. And there, staring up at me from the top of the list, was one with a subject that made my whole body go still. How do I tell you I cross-dress? I honestly think the room tilted for a second. Not in a dramatic movie way, just a quiet, internal disorientation, like my mind had missed a step on the stairs. I clicked before I could decide not to. Lisa, I have started this email so many times that I feel ridiculous even looking at the blinking cursor. If you ever read this, it means either I finally became brave or something went wrong and this found you before I was ready. I hope it's the first one, but I've been hoping that for years. I love you more than my own comfort. That is the problem and the answer. I am terrified that telling you this will make you look at me differently. I am terrified you'll think I lied to you, or that I'm not the man you married, or that you'll stop loving me in that easy way you do when you hand me a cup of coffee without asking how I take it because you already know. I stopped breathing properly after that. I remember sitting back in his chair and staring at the screen with my hand pressed over my mouth. I read the rest too fast, then went back and read it slowly. Then I opened another draft, and another. They stretched back almost 6 years, different versions of the same confession, as if he had been circling the truth over and over, trying to find a path through it that wouldn't destroy us. Some were only a paragraph, some went on for pages. A few were unsent letters to himself, almost like diary entries. I have done this since I was young. I do not know why. I am still a man. I still love women. I still love my wife. Maybe that is why this feels impossible to explain. Sometimes I think I should tell you and accept whatever happens. Sometimes I think loving you means never burdening you with it. I don't want to lose the life we have. I don't want to lose you. One draft was just a list of fears. That you'll laugh. That you'll be disgusted. That you'll think I've been secretly living another life. That you'll think this means I don't want you. That you'll leave. That you'll stay and never look at me the same again. I don't know when I started crying. There was no single moment. 1 second I was reading, and the next there were tears slipping down my face and darkening the sleeve of my cardigan as I wiped them away. Not because I was angry, not even because I was shocked, though I was. I was shocked all the way through, right down to my fingertips. But stronger than the shock was pain. Not mine at first, his. Every draft sounded like a man standing outside his own home in the cold, hand raised to knock, unable to trust that he'd still be welcomed in if the door opened. I thought about all the nights he'd seemed distracted, all the moments when I'd asked, "You okay?" and he'd smiled too fast and said, "Just tired." I thought about how often I'd mistaken silence for calm. I thought about the man I love sitting only feet away from me some evenings on this very desk chair, carrying this alone for years while deciding, again and again, that the risk of honesty was greater than the pain of secrecy. There are discoveries that make your marriage feel smaller. This did the opposite. It suddenly revealed rooms inside the person I loved that I had never seen, not because he was deceptive, but because he was afraid. I stayed there for a long time. The house was so quiet. Outside, rain had started ticking gently against the kitchen window. I could hear Flynn in the shower down the hall, water rushing through the pipes. And for one strange moment, the distance between us felt enormous. He was less than 30 feet away, and I felt like I was reading messages from someone stranded on another shore. I kept thinking one thing. He was suffering. And if I'm honest, yes, there was a version of the night where I could have reacted badly. Not cruelly, not theatrically, but badly, in that flat, frightened way people do when something bumps against their idea of normal. I was raised with plenty of quiet assumptions. Men were men, women were women. Marriage had clear lines. I'm not proud of how much of that still lived in me. But those drafts broke something open before my fear had a chance to harden into judgment, because every single word in them was love. Not polished love, not easy love. Love in its rawest form, the kind that trembles, the kind that says, I am terrified to show you this part of me, but even in hiding, all I can think about is whether it would hurt you. I closed the laptop when I heard the shower turn off. My cheeks were damp, my chest ached. I stood up and paced the office, arms wrapped around myself. Then I laughed once, shakily, because there I was, in fuzzy socks and old leggings, wandering in circles like I could somehow walk myself into knowing exactly what to say. I didn't bring it up that night. That surprised me later, because I'm not usually the type to sit on something huge. But this didn't feel like a secret I wanted to yank into the light with accusation. It felt delicate. It felt like touching a bruise. He had spent years trying to gather the courage. I wanted to meet him with something gentler than panic. The next day, I left work early. I told my manager I had a headache, which wasn't exactly a lie. My thoughts had been pounding against each other all morning. I drove to a little boutique on the other side of town where nobody knew us, and I sat in the parking lot for a full minute gripping the steering wheel. I still wasn't entirely sure what I was doing. I only knew I didn't want our first real conversation about this to begin with shame. Inside, the store smelled faintly of perfume and new fabric. Racks of clothes stood in clean rows under warm light. I moved slowly, touching things as I passed. Soft knit tops, satin camisoles, a black pencil skirt, a cream blouse with a sheen to it like poured milk. My face was hot the whole time. I probably looked suspicious, lingering over sizes and textures with watery eyes. Eventually, I chose a few things carefully. Pantyhose, sheer but not too delicate. A pair of simple black panties with a satin trim. A charcoal skirt that would move when he walked. A pale blue silk blouse that would bring out his eyes. And heels, not towering, not costume-like, just elegant and wearable, the kind a woman might actually keep by the door for an evening out. At the register, the cashier smiled and asked if I found everything okay. Yes, I said, and heard the tremor in my own voice. I think so. I took the bags home and hid them in the hall closet behind extra blankets. All afternoon, I rehearsed sentences in my mind and rejected them all. By the time Flynn came home, I felt like I was vibrating. He kissed my cheek in the kitchen and set his keys in the bowl by the door. You okay? I looked at him. Really looked. At his tired eyes, his careful mouth, the familiar slope of his shoulders inside his work shirt. My husband. My sweet, quiet, funny husband who apologized to furniture when he bumped into it. The man who warmed my side of the bed with a heating pad in winter because he knew I hated cold sheets. The man who had been so afraid of losing me that he had written 100 versions of the truth to a screen instead of speaking it aloud. No, I said softly, but I want to be. Something changed in his face. Not guilt exactly, more like recognition, as if some buried part of him had heard a door unlatch. After dinner, I asked him to come sit with me in the living room. He did, cautious now, knees apart, hands clasped together, thumb rubbing over his knuckles. "I found your email account," I said. The silence that followed was enormous. He went completely white. I watched the blood drain from his face in real time. "Lisa." I saw the drafts. His eyes shut. It was such a naked expression of pain that I almost reached for him before I'd said anything else. His shoulders folded inward like he'd been struck. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to find it like that." I started crying again, instantly, helplessly. "Why are you apologizing to me?" He looked stunned. "Flynn," I said, "I read years of you torturing yourself." He swallowed hard and stared at the carpet. "I didn't know how to tell you." "I know." I thought if I said it out loud, that would be it. You'd hear it, and I'd watch you stop loving me. The words hit me so hard, I had to put a hand against my chest. "Oh, honey." That undid him. He bent forward with his elbows on his knees and covered his face. I slid closer and touched the back of his neck, feeling the tension there, the heat of his skin. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just breathed in the wreckage of all the unsaid years. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "I've done it since I was young. Not all the time. Not because I want to be someone else. I don't know. I never knew what it meant. I like women. I love you. I feel like a man. But I also..." He gave a miserable, embarrassed laugh. "I also wanted the clothes, the feeling of them, the whole thing. And the older I got, the more ashamed I felt for not understanding why." "You don't have to have one neat explanation." "I thought you'd think it meant something bigger, that maybe I'd been lying about who I am." "Were you?" His eyes snapped to mine, frightened. I shook my head. "I'm asking you." He took a long breath. "No, I don't think so. I think I've been scared and confused, but I've never lied about loving you." "I know you haven't." He stared at me like he didn't trust what he was hearing. I stood up then, wiped my face, and went to the hall closet. My heart was banging so loudly I could hear it in my ears. When I came back with the shopping bags, his expression changed from fear to bewilderment. "Lisa." I set the bags at his feet and sat down again. "I didn't know what the right way to say this was," I told him. "So maybe I'll say it the simple way. I was shocked. I won't pretend I wasn't. But once I read those drafts, all I could think was how alone you must have felt. And I don't want you to be alone with this anymore." He looked into the bag, saw the tissue paper and silk and sheer black nylon, and actually flinched like the kindness hurt. "I thought," I said, my voice trembling now for a different reason, "maybe if you wanted, you could dress up for me." His eyes filled instantly. "You mean that?" "Yes." "You don't have to do this just because you feel bad." "I'm not," I smiled through tears. "Actually, I kind of like the idea of this being our thing, our secret." He let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in him for years. Then he laughed once, brokenly, and started crying too. It was not graceful. There was nothing cinematic about it. We sat on our couch, two grown adults crying over a boutique shopping bag under the yellow light of our living room lamp, while the dog snored in the corner. But I have rarely felt closer to another human being. He didn't put anything on that night. He wanted to. I could see that. But fear still had its hooks in him. So we talked instead. Really talked. Deeper and longer than we had in years. He told me about being a teenager and stealing private moments with clothing he could find, then hating himself afterward. He told me how he had spent years searching online for definitions, trying to figure out whether this meant he was broken or secretly trans or secretly gay or simply strange. He told me that none of those labels had ever quite fit the way people on the internet described them, which only made him feel more isolated. I took his hand and told him something I wish more people understood. Not every human feeling arrives with a clean category and a warning label. Sometimes people like what they like. Sometimes gender expression is more flexible and personal than the world allows. Sometimes a man can enjoy feminine clothing and still be a man, still love his wife, still be exactly himself. The relief on his face was almost painful to see. A week later, he wore the panties. He came out of the bedroom with his shoulders tense and his eyes lowered, like he was bracing for ridicule. Instead, I smiled and walked over and straightened the hem of his t-shirt, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, then laughed nervously. "They're surprisingly comfortable." I had a feeling. That became our first easy moment. The next time, he tried the pantyhose too. He stood in front of me in the bedroom, awkward and beautiful in his vulnerability, running his hands down his legs with this startled little smile. "I forgot how this feels," he murmured. I kissed his cheek and said, "You don't have to forget anymore." Eventually there was the skirt, then the blouse, then the heels, which he was terrible at first and dramatically better at after exactly 3 attempts, because Flynn is annoyingly competent once he decides to learn something. We laughed so hard the first time he made it from the bedroom to the kitchen without wobbling that we had to lean against the counter to catch our breath. And yes, there were intimate moments after that. Tender, private moments that belonged only to us. But what surprised me most wasn't the novelty. It was the closeness, the trust, the way honesty changed the atmosphere between us, like opening a window in a house that had been shut too long. He seemed lighter, softer, more present. I realized how much energy secrecy had been draining from him, and from us, without my even knowing it. Over time, I found I loved small things best. Not the dramatic reveal of an outfit, but the ordinary domestic sweetness of him wearing panties under his jeans while we folded laundry. The sight of him in pantyhose on the couch while we watched a terrible reality show and shared popcorn. The little glance he'd give me, half shy and half playful, when our eyes met and we both remembered that this had once felt impossible. It did become our secret, but not in a dark way, in a warm way, in a sacred way. And I'm not saying every partner will react the same, or that every marriage can absorb surprise without strain. People are people. We all come to things with histories and fears and limits. But I keep coming back to this. If I had only found the fact of it, maybe I would have stumbled. What changed everything was finding the feeling inside it, the love, the terror, the years of him trying to speak because he trusted me enough to want to be known, even if he couldn't quite make himself do it. I'm glad I found that secret email account. I'm glad the first message was to me. Because underneath all those drafts, underneath all the confusion and shame, what Flynn had been writing for years was really one long love letter. He was asking the same question over and over in different words. If I show you all of me, will you still stay? My answer is yes. And maybe that's what I want anyone listening to take from this. Be gentler with the people you love. Be curious before you are judgmental. Understand that cross-dressing is far more common and normal than most people realize, and it does not automatically mean all the scary things people assume. For us, it meant my husband had a private part of himself he was afraid to share. Once he did, our marriage didn't fall apart. It deepened. It softened. It became more honest. Now when I think of that night, I don't picture betrayal. I picture a blinking cursor in a hidden drafts folder and the brave, aching truth of a man trying for years to tell his wife who he was. I picture my own tears falling onto the keyboard as I realized how much he had been carrying alone. And I picture the life we have now, quieter perhaps, but fuller, more trusting, more real. Sometimes love arrives as a grand declaration. Sometimes it arrives as a secret email account, an unsent message, a silk blouse folded in tissue paper, and 2 people deciding that truth is less frightening than loneliness. I will always be grateful we chose truth.